It's a pleasure, though, to be here, to be back with you all this morning. And I appreciated also those quotes about truth. Truth is on my mind, as it has been for all of us, for many reasons. Now, it is interesting to me, and I think somehow significant, that the root of the word truth and true in our language is a Proto-Indo-European root, which is basically a linguist's way of saying so far back we're not really sure where it came from. But that root word, deru, means tree, as in something that is solid, verifiable, straight in many ways. So we speak of a piece of woodwork as being true when we're talking about its kind of straightness as well. Uh, the true and truth are a tree. And it's interesting how it fits into other words where we have truth, to be betrothed, for example. So I think being married beneath the limbs of a tree is probably a good way to be true to your sentiment there. The word druid also is related to that druid word for tree, and the combination with the word that means to see or to know. So the Druids were the ones who could see the trees, the ones who could know the truth. Um, and a tree there was that grew in the hall of Breidablik, the bright and shining hall, the home of Baldr, beloved golden god of Asgard, son of Odin and Frigg, brother of Hod. Balder and Hod were brothers, but they were as different as night and day. Hod was blind, and his realm was darkness, but a kind of darkness, the place where the sun was not, the realm of the shadows, the cool, comforting darkness of the recesses of the cave, the calming darkness in those moments in the night where we find ourselves revived, the darkness in the pause between moments of light. Whereas Balder was light itself. Not the sunlight that lets us see what we are doing so much as that glittering light upon the ripples of the water in the stream, or that sparkling light on the ice and the snow, that bright light of revelation. That was Baldr. And his hall, Breidablik, in Asgard, was a popular place. So I've been thinking about this story of Baldr. We don't really have a lot of information about it, a lot of original detail, but we can talk about that later in our discussion. But it certainly came to mind in recent days. Balder was a popular god, and of all the attributes given to him, of the very few there were, was beloved, beloved, beloved. He was just the one that everybody up there in Asgard loved. In the nine realms, in the great world Ash, Yggdrasil. Some of you may know about the Norse cosmology, and we can discuss that some more later too if you want. But the thing that intrigues me about him is that his home was a gathering place for healing and for justice. Any decision made over any dispute that was made in that hall of Breidablik was fast and firm, was, if you will, true and held. Now, Breidablik, as a bright and shining hall, it was said, admitted no deception, no deceit. And for that reason, there were some who did not enter into Baldr's hall. Now, Hod did not enter because of the darkness. That he went where the light was not, and he was darkness itself. But there was another who did not enter because he was not allowed, and he was the god of lies, the disturber, the deceiver, and I imagine many of you know who he was. Loki, they called him. Loki could not enter into that bright place, but that did not stop him from trying to find ways to create trouble and to disturb things. Well, so there was a disturbance that happened in that hall, and it came in the form of a dream. Now, this was not Loki's doing, but it was his opportunity. So Baldr had a bad dream. Well, we all have bad dreams, and we can easily dismiss them as just a dream, but anything that entered into Baldr's hall, you see, was true. And so that dream had to be true. And so Odin, the father, all father, they called him, decided to find out the truth of this dream and rode his steed down the 9 realms. And we can have a lot of fun. If you're a storyteller, there's all sorts of opportunities to get off the path and really talk about all sorts of different things that are happening here. But I will try to stay close to the line of the story. So he goes all the way down to the realm of Hel, one of Loki's daughters, half corpse and half beauty, which is an interesting way to think about what death may be. She was the queen of the realm of the dead. And Odin goes there because of some portents in Baldr's dream, and there he finds that they are indeed making ready for a feast to welcome Baldr, for Baldr is doomed to die. Well, Odin wants to learn more about this, and so he calls up, using his power of runes, again another opportunity to go into a deeper story. But he brings up the spirit of a dead seeress, a prophetess who could see beyond his own one-eyed sight. And she tells him, yes, indeed, Baldr is doomed to die, and that is going to presage the beginning of the end. Baldr's death is the first sign of the coming of the Ragnarok, the end of the great days of the gods, when the gods and all their enemies will come into a great destructive battle, and they will destroy one another, and all that is familiar will pass. And so she tells him this prophecy, and he understands it, and he brings it back with him, and he reports, especially to Frigg, his wife, Baldr's mother, Baldr is doomed to die. But, in a perfectly motherly fashion, Frigg says, no, that's not going to happen. We are not going to let that happen. I am going to see that Baldr will not die. Every mother wants to protect their child. Frigg goes out to protect her child. She puts on her cape of falcon feathers and flies throughout the 9 realms and goes to everything that might cause him harm, and anything, the 4 elements, earth, fire, water, air, the animals of all the realms and the creatures of the realms, the dwarves, the light elves, the dark elves, the giants, the people, all throughout. Now, this is what interests me, is this, again, another opportunity to go down a rabbit hole as a storyteller. Can you think of all the ways that you can come to harm? How often do we have that apprehension of what could happen? Walking into a strange new place, one of the first things we do is look around for what could go wrong here, right? Social settings, if we're uncomfortable in a social setting, how can I mess things up? Yeah, right? How do I have to be careful, right? Come into a strange space. These days, any open space, we go with apprehension, to the grocery store or to the park or anywhere we might find other people. Does that person have a mask? Does that person not have a mask? How close is close enough, and how far is far enough? And all of these kinds of apprehensions. Now imagine a mother going throughout the entire realm of existence in order to assure that all of the possible ways of things going bad will not happen. This is pretty exhaustive. But that's what Frigg does. She secures a promise, a covenant from all creation that none will bring harm to Baldr. And I imagine back in Asgard, all the gods who like to mess around, and all of their different personalities, how do they find out that Baldr then becomes this unassailable being? Well, it's probably Thor who's getting angry. He's got his hammer and he's flashing anger over something, and he slams his hammer down upon a stone, and the stone bursts into a million sharp shards and goes flying through the air straight towards Baldr. And then everybody stops, oh my gosh, shocked because their beloved Baldr is in harm's way. And then to their amazement, those shards of stone turn into dust, fall aside. And Baldr stands perfectly untouched, unharmed. Well, this becomes a source of fascination. And when Frigg comes home, she sees that everyone is trying to harm Baldr, the one that they love the most. And this does not make sense to her until she sees that when they throw a spear at him, it glances aside. When they throw a stone at him, it goes aside. When they throw fire at him, it extinguishes itself. And she realizes, she has done what every mother wishes to do. She has secured safety for her son, that he will not come to harm. And everybody's having a wonderful time at this, and she is feeling proud of her good work. And of course, Loki has seen his opportunity. This is too much fun, he thinks. There's not enough trouble here. Trouble is needed. And he sees that Frigg knows something, and he wants to find out what it is. Of course, she won't speak to him, but he is a shapeshifter. That is the way the god of deception works. And so Loki crooks his nose, thins his hair into long, gray, greasy tassels, hunches his back, and cramps his joints, and lets his breast hang down as pendants, and his face crunch up into weathered, wrinkled age. He becomes a crone. And leaning on a staff, he comes to Frigg, who sees an old mother coming her way. And that is what she sees, for she is deceived by his appearance. Old mother, come and sit. Come and sit and rest your weary bones beside me. Oh, thank you, I will rest. Look at how the boys are having so much fun. Isn't it wonderful? Oh, ho, ho, says the old crone. I don't know about that. I've never been comfortable watching my boys flirt with danger. Why is it that they always want to put themselves into harm's way? It would give me a heart attack if that were my son. Oh, yes, says Frigg, I would do the same for me, but I have no fear of harm ever coming to Baldr, for I've taken care of everything. And so she reveals to the old mother how she had put on her cloak of falcon feathers and gone throughout all the realms and secured a promise from every being, every element, that no harm would come to her son. And Loki, as the old crone, listens. My goodness, what a mother you must be. How hard you have worked to secure for yourself and your son that which all mothers desire. How I wish I could have done the same myself, but I must live with the pain of my loss. Oh, it is the greatest of tragedies to outlive one's children. Oh, yes, oh, mother, I'm so sorry for your loss. But still, we endure, we carry on. Are you sure you've really taken care of everything for your son? I think there's so many different ways our children can come into harm. I mean, even the ants. I mean, look, the little ants there on the ground. An ant may seem like a little thing, totally harmless, but, they can cause quite a lot of pain, if you come upon them in the right way. Oh, yes. I thought about that, and I did indeed get the ants to agree. Don't see those ants down there? They stand aside. They walk aside of Baldr. They won't go near him. Oh, well, isn't that good? Isn't that good? But what about ice? Ice can be very dangerous. The sharp icicles that hang down from the ledge of a cliff or something like that. I mean, you might think, well, it's only water, but you walk beneath it, the thing falls upon you, and well, that's the end of you. Yes, I thought of that too. Yeah, well, aren't you the most wonderful mother ever there was? A feather. A feather, perhaps. Sure, a little feather. It can tickle a child, and yet get it up your nose, and that's trouble. Yes, indeed, the birds have promised that they will bring no harm to Paul. Well, you are the finest of mothers, indeed. You are indeed, you are indeed. Well, well, nothing at all you overlooked, perhaps, you saw something that was harmless out there in the world. I mean, the world is not all dangerous. There are some things that are harmless. Well, said Frigg, yes. When I spoke to the oak and I asked of it its promise to keep Baldr safe, I saw that in the cleft of the oak was a tiny little mistletoe plant growing, little green thing there. I thought, well, that's just a child. That can cause no harm to anyone. So I did not bother to secure a promise from that little mistletoe. Oh, well, of course, I can understand that completely. Yes, absolutely. Why should you bother that? Harmless thing. Well, this may be fun to watch your son come in harm's way, but it reminds me too much of my own loss. I must be on my way. Well, good mother, go with my blessing. What a kind old woman. Yes, what a kind old woman. Well, Loki now knew there was yet one thing in all creation that had not signed up to keep Balder safe. And he went to the mistletoe. He threw off his disguise of the crone and just said, "You've been insulted. You've been overlooked. Everybody else was important enough for the goddess's attention, but you should get some revenge, and I will help you." So Balder took from the mistletoe a little twig, a little bit of it, but enough to make a very sharp dart. And then he came back to Asgard, where all the gods were playing at Get Baldr. When I was a kid, maybe some of you played these games as a boys. Maybe some of all of you did, but we used to play a game called Murder the Guy with the Ball. Ridiculous, right? But the whole idea was it was sort of our interpretation of football, I think, because what we do is you throw the ball in the air, somebody would catch it, and everybody would have to pile on him and try and get him. But before anybody could get you, the idea was to throw the ball to somebody else, right? Kind of like a hot potato. So here they are, they're all playing, right? And Loki comes and he sees them all, but there's one who stands aside, Baldur's brother, Hod. He's in the shadows, which is his realm. And Loki comes to Hod and says, "Don't you see what they are doing? Can't you see how they are honoring Baldr by showering him with their attention? There he stands, unassailable, the unassailable truth. And you are not participating? Do you not love your brother? How can you stand aside and insult him so?" Ha! And Hod answers, "Loki, I know your voice. Do not speak to me of seeing. You know I do not see as you mean it. I dwell in darkness. Baldr is light. I belong here, and he there." "But," said Loki, "you can participate. I can help you. I can help you. Why don't you let me guide your hand? And you can throw something at Baldr to show at least that you appreciate him and are aware of his situation." Well, thought Hoddo, very well. And so Loki puts into Hod's hand the little mistletoe dart with a little bow tightly strung. And Hod can feel it's sharp. Yes, it is. But, they're throwing boulders at the man. I don't think this little dart will bring him any harm. Here, let me guide your hand. Now hold it up a little bit higher and pull back the string just like so. Yes, indeed. Now, when I tell you, release it. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, go! And that mistletoe dart flew sure and straight, true to Baldr's heart. And in the midst of the flashing of swords and the throwing of spears and the roaring of fire and the falling of stones, Baldr stopped. For his heart had stopped. And he said, "There are no greater carvers than the Norns, no finer carvings than the fates they make for us. If I am to die now, I will not die later. And if I'm not to die later, then I will die now." And the mistletoe drew from him his life, and his light shone in its bright berries. And Baldr fell. And such was the death of the great beloved Baldr, and such was the beginning of the end, presaging Ragnarok. Now, of course, Frigg tries to do what every mother or any bereaved parent would do: turn back time. She tries to bring him back to life, and she herself goes down to Helheim, the home of hell and the realm of the dead, and she secures from hell an agreement. Sounds some familiar, maybe like Orpheus descending, if you will, and hell says, okay, you can have Baldr back if everyone and everything in all the realms grieves for him. And so again, she puts on her cloak of falcon feathers, and again, she goes to absolutely everything and everywhere, and all creation is allowed with mourning, grieving, crying for the death of beloved Baldr, all except one angry goddess in the recess of a cave, whom Frigg finds and cannot convince to mourn for Baldr. And again, another wonderful opportunity for a storyteller to have a conversation, but I won't go into the details here, except to say this giantess was a deception of Loki. He, the one who wants to bring trouble, he, the disturber, he, the destroyer. And so she fails, and Baldr must die. Laid upon his great ship, the Ringhorn, with his wife, Nanna, who has grievously fallen beside him. Pushed out to sea, a flame, a fire, dwindling in the darkness, the coming of the end. Ragnarok, the end of the gods, the end of days. Back in 1986, I took a wonderful portage canoe trip with my sister and brother-in-law and my wife, and we were up in Alaska on the Kenai Peninsula. It was a week-long trip of going from linked lakes along the Moose River, and so we'd have to portage little isthmuses between the lakes. And at the very end of our camping trip, this was in the summertime, as we were coming out of that last lake and down the Moose River towards the mouth of the river where we were going to leave and finish our trip, we came through these marshy fields strewn with the rotting, stinking corpses of salmon, their mouths agape, their eyes dead, peeling open, buzzing with black flies, and their dead bellies bursting with roe, with salmon eggs. I remember seeing that scene and thinking, this must be what Ragnarok looks like. And as we went down the river, we came from the future into the past, for then we came down to stretches and bends where there were salmon struggling to get into that battlefield, struggling to die, to go to the place of death, to the fields of death. And I almost wanted to say, don't you see what's coming? Can't you? Why are you doing this? But then we went a little further down, and more vigorous salmon were leaping high and following the ones before them. And as we came further down, there were all the people seining the salmon out of the river for their own needs, and the water was boiling with all of this urgency and life seeking its own end. And it makes me think of this story and the becoming of Ragnarok, and the inevitability of the fates the Norns carve for us. Baldr, if he was truth, is dead. He is dead now. And this is not a Christian story. This is not a death and resurrection story. This is not but he comes back to life and everything's fine, and Baldr becomes the personification of truth, the way Christ is referred to as the light and the way and the truth. This is the death of Baldr, and whatever truth he was is gone. But the seeress who spoke to Odin when he was there in the realm of the dead, saw beyond Baldr's death and saw beyond the details of Ragnarok, Odin's own death, Thor's death, the death of all the gods, and said, then begins the green age. So that is the story. Loki, the god of death, the god of lies, I beg your pardon, has weaponized the innocent mistletoe and the naive brother to assail the unassailable truth. And, not that long ago, I was pretty sure I knew who Loki was in our time. I was pretty sure I knew who the weaponized, innocent, and naive people were who were assailing truth. But the events of the past year have shaken even that knowledge for me. As I look at and listen to the stories of the indigenous peoples of the world, the Me Too movement, of the Black Lives Matter movement, and I have to reflect, how have I been weaponized to assail the truth? We when in 2016, when the last presidential election happened, lies were rampant. And there was this strange feeling I had, the same as when I went down that river looking at the salmon saying, can't you see? Don't you see where this is going? Don't you see where you are leaping with these lies? I'm sure many of us felt that way too. And it was a very upsetting and disturbing time. But, those lies and that assault on truth, in some strange way, paradoxically, allowed for us to realize other lies, deep-seated, deep-rooted, that we had been living by for so long. So I say, Baldr is dead. That truth is gone. And now we are in this time, awaiting the green age. And how will we know the truth? When we see it again. I don't know. It's a mystery. What do you think?